Welcome back to The Explainer. So, look, we've all tried to save a few bucks on a post-graduation trip, right? You cram a bunch of friends together, split the bill, and expect the absolute time of your life. But today, we're diving deep into the Maroon files to see how a cheap hotel booking in June 2026 turned into a literal multi-day paranormal nightmare. We're following a young guy named Vivek and 10 of his friends. They were fresh out of 12th grade in Jaki, and they decided to take this massive group trip to the coastal city of Puri and Odisha before, heading off to college. Sounds like a dream, right? Well, as we'll uncover, this celebratory getaway quickly spiraled into absolute escalating terror. To really wrap our heads around this story, we have to look at it completely through Vivek's eyes. Because the thing is, he explicitly told the Maroon Files that he was a strict, hardcore skeptic. No ghosts, no spirits, no paranormal activity whatsoever. He firmly believed he was never going to buy into any of it unless he actually experienced it firsthand. Well, unfortunately for him, he feels he got exactly that, a terrifyingly real live demonstration. And we are going to objectively trace exactly what that demonstration looked like. Okay, let's dive into this, because the sheer terror of this story really starts with where they were staying. To save cash for food and exploring, all 11 boys crammed into just 2 rooms on the top floor of their hotel. But right next door, and I mean right next door, was a place called Swarg Dwar, or Mukti Dham. Now, this is an active local crematorium. Seriously, on their very first morning, the boys looked down from their balcony and saw bodies actively being burned on the pyres down below. Talk about a morbid start, right? This proximity completely sets the stage for everything that comes next. And the chaos, it kicked off on night 1. Picture this. It's 12:30 a.m., the guys are completely exhausted from traveling, they're drifting off with some music playing, and suddenly there's this unmistakable, rhythmic knocking on the balcony door. Not the wind, a distinct, intentional pattern. Just a few minutes later, they hear the heavy, frantic sound of footsteps sprinting directly above them on the ceiling, which, by the way, is physically impossible since they were on the top floor with a locked terrace right above them. By 1 a.m., things get worse. The unmistakable sound of heavy metal anklets forcefully slides right under their bed, dragging from one wall to the other. And then the kicker. Around 1:30 a.m., Vivek steps out into the hallway and actually catches terrifying video footage of the heavy metal latch on his locked room door aggressively moving entirely on its own. At this point, the boys are in a sheer panic. One of the friends, Karan, actually calls his dad in the middle of the night. His dad hears the absolute terror in his son's voice, but, tries to rationalize it as just a burglar. So he gives them this truly bizarre folk remedy. He tells them to urinate and then sprinkle it on the balcony door and the main gate. I know, it sounds completely absurd, right? But out of pure desperation, the guys actually tried it. Spoiler alert, it completely failed. The sounds didn't stop. They actually got louder. Realizing the weird remedy totally flopped, the boys completely abandoned the 2-room setup. All 11 of them crammed into one single room. And as they were moving through the hallway, they realized they weren't the only ones terrified. They could hear panicked Odia voices echoing from the adjacent room. The guests next door were experiencing the exact same thing. Now, the very next day brings a crucial shift in our story, when 5 relatives arrived to join the trip. This new group includes a boy named Mukesh and 2 sisters. And one of those sisters happens to be the daughter of a practicing Guru Ma, which is a spiritual healer. Keep that in mind, because that detail is absolutely vital later on. So skipping ahead to the 4th night, the entity seemingly shifts its tactics. It starts narrowing in on one specific target, a boy named Bunty, who had gone to sleep in the room with the newly arrived relatives. Around 1 a.m., the torment gets incredibly personal. The music playing on Bunty's phone just starts pausing and unpausing entirely on its own. Frustrated, he yanks out his earbuds, only to be met with the deafening, horrifying sound of dogs howling right outside the hotel. And to cap it all off, while his roommates are dead asleep, the bathroom tap suddenly cranks open by itself. Absolutely petrified by the tap turning on, Bunty wakes up his older relatives and they all practically sprint to the main room to huddle with the rest of the guys. Bunty sits on the edge of the bed, and he just can't stop staring at the balcony door, the exact same door where the knocking had started days earlier. According to the source, what Bunty saw next was an apparition of a young woman, maybe 23 or 24 years old. But here is the terrifying part. She had no eyes. And crucially, in a room completely packed full of people, Bunty was the absolute only one who could see her. And this brilliantly illustrates the insane clash between modern tech and paranormal interference. In a total panic after seeing this eyeless woman, Bunty whips out his phone and frantically tries to play the Hanuman Chalisa, which is a Hindu devotional hymn used for protection. He checks his screen, full bars, a perfect mobile network connection, no technical glitches at all, yet the audio of the prayer keeps aggressively pausing. It freezes for seconds at a time and then abruptly starts again. It behaved exactly as if an unseen force was actively, literally, jamming the frequency to stop that protective prayer from playing. By the next evening, they are desperate. Vivek calls his mother, who connects him with a spiritual practitioner known as Maharaj Ji. They actually try a remote exorcism right over speakerphone, with Maharaj Ji chanting mantras through the device. But the reaction is immediate, and it's violent. Bunty starts laughing in this deeply strange, completely unnatural tone. He violently twists his neck, drops the phone, and throws himself face down on the floor. The spirit had taken full control. It took all 10 of the other boys in that room to physically pin down his thrashing body. So while they're pinning Bunty to the floor, this layered, distorted voice starts coming out of his mouth, and it definitely wasn't his. The spirit explicitly calls out 4 specific names: Rakesh, Vivek, Karan, and Govind. The entity angrily declares it is going to take these 4 with it. Why? Well, because these were the 4 boys actively trying to stop it. Karan had called his dad, Vivek called the priest, and Rakesh and Govind had been hurling insults at the spirit. In fact, it was Govind who finally broke the trance. He stepped right up, violently slapped Bunty, and aggressively yelled at the entity until Bunty finally snapped back to consciousness. But man, the ordeal was far from over. Almost the exact second Bunty wakes up, Mukesh, one of the relatives who arrived on day 2, suddenly announces he feels incredibly heavy. The entity had literally just jumped hosts. Fortunately, this is exactly where Guru Ma's daughter steps in. Using the spiritual knowledge she learned from her mother, she works in tandem with Maharaj Ji, who's still commanding them over the phone. Together, using specific mantras and burning incense waved aggressively all around the room, they managed to temporarily force the spirit out of Mukesh, barricading the room with a spiritual spell. The true gravity of what they were dealing with was confirmed shortly after by Guru Ma herself, who was meditating hundreds of miles away back in Chhattisgarh. She calls her daughters with a genuinely chilling revelation. She tells them that 2 people had recently committed suicide inside their exact room. She urgently warns them that these spirits are trapped in that space, and they are intentionally waiting for the moment when they can catch just one of the boys alone to completely overpower them. Their safety in numbers was quite literally the only thing keeping them alive. Taking Guru Ma's desperate warnings seriously, every single person in the group shoves themselves into the one remaining room. They literally drag a heavy mattress over to the main door, completely barricading it, and just sit there in absolute silence. Then, at exactly 1:30 a.m., the atmosphere in the room grows incredibly heavy. And then they hear it. The distinct, intense, and totally heart-wrenching sound of a girl loudly sobbing right outside their door in the hallway. They didn't move a muscle. All 11 of them stayed wide awake, staring at that door in pure terror until 4 in the morning. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the mechanics of the possession itself. The next day, desperate to find some help, they take Bunty to the famous Jagannath temple. Standing near a temple guard, Bunty seems completely fine. He's just calmly scrolling through his phone. The guard literally tells them, hey, the boy is normal. But the group figured out the trigger. The very moment they brought Guru Ma's daughter into Bunty's direct line of sight, his body violently stiffened, the phone dropped from his hand, and he glared at her with pure, unadulterated anger. Her spiritual presence acted as an immediate catalyst, forcing the entity to reveal itself. Let's move on and see how this builds, because this escalating terror finally culminated in a physical exorcism with a local Nepali tantric. After sitting the boys down and chanting over them, the tantric has them gather coconuts, flowers, and incense. He performs this intensely structured ritual to trap the entities, which, by the way, he confirmed were the souls of a boy and a girl. He supposedly traps them into a physical sack. He then hands the sack to the temple priest with very strict instructions. Take it directly to Mukti Dham, the crematorium next to their hotel, and burn it on an active funeral pyre to physically liberate the trapped souls. Burning that sack at the crematorium actually seemed to work instantly. Bunty and Mukesh snapped right back to normal. But there was a final terrifying relapse at the railway station, just hours before their train back to Chiskatir. Bunty goes off to buy some water, and when he comes back, he locks eyes with Guru Ma's daughter. He gives her this wicked, completely unnatural smirk and whispers, "This is happening to me again." The daughter was immediately drained of her energy. It became glaringly obvious the cremation ritual wasn't quite enough. When they finally got back to their home state, they had to take Bunty directly to Guruma's house, where she had to use her full powers to permanently sever the entity's hold on him. So the crucial point is, after they finally made it home safely, one huge question lingered. Why them? Why did this entire nightmare unfold exactly the way it did? Well, when Vivek detailed the whole harrowing experience to his school teacher, the teacher was incredibly disturbed. He decided to leverage his own local contacts in Odisha to investigate the specific hotel and the specific floor the boys had booked in Puri. And let me tell you, what the teacher discovered validated every single terrifying thing the group had experienced. The teacher uncovered the dark truth behind room 302. He discovered that recently a young couple from West Bengal had rented that exact room and tragically committed suicide together inside it, a boy and a girl, which perfectly matches the two entities the tantric identified and entirely explains the crying, eyeless woman Bunty saw. These boys had unknowingly stepped right into a spiritually active crime scene. Now, while Bunty and Mukesh are reportedly safe today, it really leaves us with a deeply provocative thought. Did the boys truly escape the spirits of room 302? Or did those entities simply realize they couldn't isolate a target in time before they left? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep your eyes open, and we'll see you next time.